All right, as you heard in the intro, NBA pods are back, and who else? None other than Grayson Hill. Obviously, the last time we did an NBA pod was after the finals 2 years in a row. We've only gotten 5 games, so hopefully this preview for the second year in a row makes up for it. But before we jump into that, Grayson obviously is not new around here, but for the new listeners, want to make sure that they get an introduction. But we'll run through the Eastern Conference in this pod, and then whichever day this doesn't come out, if you're listening to this on Tuesday on release day, then West will be out on Thursday, vice versa, however it ends up working out. So be sure to stay subscribed for that. And then, stuff will be starting to roll out as well. You heard a little bit in the intro, probably me talk about SeatGeek. You'll hear me talk about them throughout this podcast as well. Again, they're going to be the presenting sponsor once more. We're greatly appreciative of them, as well as a lot of great college basketball stuff is coming as well. You'll see a college basketball preview, the 21 Questions Show with the Jim and Range podcast that was recorded at the beginning of October. And you'll see that here. By the time you're listening to this live, it'll be next week. So look for that week there. And we've got some really cool interviews to open up the college basketball season. NBA will be 2 weeks in at that point. I'll be on vacation a week into the NBA season, so hard to do. It's just 1 week, but so we'll just have to kind of we'll work something out. We did that last year. I thought it was really fun, very overreactionary based, and so this will definitely be a lot more level-headed, I'm sure. But before we jump into all of that, let's introduce Grayson. First of all, how are you after the what feels like really long offseason for the NBA, even with the Olympics? It's kind of weird.
Yeah, the Olympics was a nice touch. You only get every 4 years, but been doing well. If you listened before, I am a huge Thunder fan and a very poor person as far as hiding that bias. So I will try and rein myself in when we jump over to the Western Conference in a little bit. But offseason, like you said, felt long. I've been wanting it to be opening night for weeks, if not months now, especially after some Sam Presti activity throughout the brief offseason. But, I mean, it's one of my favorite sports to watch, if not my favorite sport to watch. Whoever created NBA League Pass needs a raise every week. Looking forward to just diving into League Pass teams, League Pass players, every game all the time. Really excited to sit down and preview, put things on the records. We can look back mid-season, postseason, all those things, and see how well we did, relative to our, we'll have hindsight. We'll have this on the record confirmed. Love sitting down, going through team by team. Some we'll talk about more, some we'll talk about less. I suspect we talked pre-show. The West will be a bit of a longer listen because there is a lot of teams very close together. But we will give you our best thoughts and predictions on the East as well as the West, and I'm excited to get into it.
All right. Yeah, look, without further ado, I'm excited to get into it as well. As you see on the bottom of the screen here, we're going to hit the Eastern Conference. Look, I don't want to be disrespectful to one conference or the other because I feel like this conversation changes every single year, and it's just like this just weird back and forth, and yet it kind of just ends up wherever the stars are. And yet here we are with a Celtics team that I'm just going to jump right into it. I have it number one. And so the way we kind of do this in the past, I kind of talked about it earlier, is, we're going to talk about some of the win totals as well for some of the, for the bet openly side of things, as Grayson's got on the hoodie there. No free ads, but it's an ad for them. And so that's why 1009 Podcast is repped over here. But, look, those are very important to think about in the grand scheme of, okay, you sit down and you do a preview and you talk about every team. I think we had this happen last year. We were really like, we were kind of high on every team in the West. We were like, okay, but 4 of them are going to suck. And so you kind of have to go, all right, well, you either lose money by flipping wherever your bet goes, or you kind of just have to like play the total number of, okay, there's 30 teams. I'm going to be up if I win 16 of them, which is actually a really good ratio for these win totals. But in the grand scheme of things, this is a previewing of the teams and the individual rankings of these conferences. So I have Boston number one. I have a question for each of these teams, just to guide our thoughts and like kind of where I was when I did this. But I'll just ask you formally for the first time this year: do you have Boston at 1, and why?
Yes, I do, because I think this is largely the team we saw for most of last season. You could point to the absence of Porzingis. That is something they dealt with flying colors regular season and postseason last year. I mean, he's a hell of a player, and this team is so good that he is truly essentially gravy to the rest of this roster. They brought Lonnie Walker in. It's the only notable transaction I saw across the wire from them. As far as activity in free agency or things like that, which again, when you just ripped off the run they did, you don't have to do much. So they're going to rest and rehab Porzingis, it sounds like, until about the end of the calendar year. And obviously with
So let's just say February, because that's probably what will happen.
right, exactly. I was about to say, with injuries like that, you're talking about months. It's really a case by case basis as far as athlete recovery time. Things they can control, things they can't control. So obviously, best wishes to him as he works his way back. He seemed pretty confident in recent days about his progress, but again, it's a slow grind to hopefully a very long and lengthy, fully healthy stint from him. So I hesitated a bit on top dog in the regular season because of that point, but again, I went and looked back, and they kind of had to deal with this last year as well. I don't think they'll be among the teams chasing regular season accolades just because of, again, where the bar is for Boston in general, especially coming off a title now. So I think that they will be the best team in the East, and I'm fairly confident they will once again be the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
I just feel like it was one of the most dominant playoff runs in recent memory. We highlighted it. It was basically every pod. Like, it was okay.
No game sixes. Yeah.
Like, just literally just, I'm not going to call it perfect. It just wasn't. But the Porzingis point is the one thing I'm not necessarily going to push back on it, because they literally returned the exact same roster. And so, like, this isn't like some drastic fall off because they lost Drew Holiday or something, right? Celtics fans are going to disagree with you on the point of Porzingis is kind of a throw-in, like a thing at this point where, like, when he, think they're going to be dominant without him, and they are. I'm not disagreeing with that point, but there is a clear distinction between a team with Porzingis and a team without. Like,
Oh, sure.
They just night and day. The stretch that he gave them there, especially even in the finals before he, I think he got hurt again
Game
or
2,
later
yeah.
in game 2, and so. I mean, he was like, we were talking about I think we had the conversation. We were talking about finals MVP odds for him after game 1. I was like, okay, like, this is real. Like, and it's not even just like a stretch in the floor, a rebounding big, anything like that. It's just the way teams have to guard him in such a unique way. It's something that this team's already impossible to guard as is, and especially in the forward and the wing position, or excuse me, in the guard and the wing position. But you add in a guy like that is going to stretch the floor, but also be one of your most dominant rebounders. It changes their whole dynamic. So my question for the Celtics, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the Celtics make it out of the East? And then same question, but win back-to-back finals. You probably knew that was coming.
Yeah, I mean, if a team like this and the situation they're in, that's kind of where the bar is at, right? I kind of mentioned the high expectations. As far as the East, I'm going to go – I won't go half, but I'll go 8 out of 10, maybe closer to 7.5, but I think 8 out of 10. It's just a lot of unknowns. We had the Nova Knicks for 2 weeks. We have what looks good on paper in Philadelphia, which is true every October. And Milwaukee's another question mark with, does Dame care? Can Doc coach? Other things. Just a lot more questions with other teams that will be up in that upper tier of the East. But I'm not convinced yet that tier is not a chase group behind Boston at this point. Like, I think there's Boston. You pause for a second, and then you rattle off teams like Knicks, Bucks, Sixers, etc. So I think that 8 out of 10 coming out of the East. And as far as repeating as a champion, that's hard for any team led by any star player or any conglomerate of guys that gelled enough to just run through the playoffs. I go 6, and that's probably the highest I've been in a while. I just think it works so well. You hope that their injuries begin and end with the Porzingis situation. That's something that's going to resolve, well early enough to where they can incorporate him back in and just become that next level of scary, like you alluded to. So, I go 8 out of 10 getting out of the East. I think, again, they enter the season with that being the expectation as you're playing for a championship. And then, if they get to the finals, it's a best of 7 series. Anything can happen. We see it every year. It's just such an unknown. I've got to knock it down to a 6. But that being said, that 60% confidence of repeating is about as high as I've probably been since LeBron was leading a top team. So, I mean, that's not to be shrugged at.
Very well said. Who do you have at number 2?
I've got the Sixers.
Okay,
And
this is already off to a flying start.
I wrestled with it. I really, really did.
Understandably,
I
yeah.
I just think they are more concerned about regular season than any franchise in the sport. And we saw this when they begged and pleaded to get Embiid a media backdoor MVP, which I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but like Daryl Morey got on his knees and wept for it. Like that's a thing that happened. And maybe not, now that Woj is retired, he'll reveal that in a book or something. I can't wait. But a lot of moving parts in Philadelphia. Maxey, not one of them. He's back. He's paid. They've got Andre Drummond now. There's some people out there that play fantasy basketball that love him, so we'll see how that works. Obviously, Paul George is going to be the biggest prize for them. Caleb Martin doesn't get as much attention because of the Paul George ad. Reggie Jackson's been a guy who can promote winning basketball. We saw it in Denver a bit. So a lot of retooling outside of the guys you'll see on the pregame graphic when they play national televised games, which they'll play plenty, I'm sure. And I think they're going to be more motivated than other teams like a Bucks team that's, won a title, been there before, understands, if you're in the top four, you get home court, you can live with that. So they may not be as necessarily dead set on we have to prove something in the regular season because they have priors of advancing well past anywhere Philadelphia's gotten in recent history. It's essentially the entire Embiid tenure. So that played a decent part in my decision to put Philly at 2.
So a couple things. I have them at 3. So let me just be transparent about that.
I mean,
I have them at 3. Really quick for Boston, we didn't go over the win totals. So let's hit Boston's win total really quick, and then we'll go jump into Phillies and kind of talk through Philly. So what is Boston's win total today as of recording this? People will see it within a few days, but we're recording this on October 13th.
Yes. 58.5 is where it is currently.
Whoa. Okay. Wait a minute. Oh, God. It's so hard because we're like doing this sort of on the fly. Obviously, we prepped this, but like,
right.
The tough thing about like, that's such an interesting number. I want to hit a few here in a row. Obviously, we'll hit Phillies in a second. Mm-hmm. I'm still thinking. So, what do you think?
I leaned under just because
I did too. But the East is worse. It's so much weird because, like,
right.
I don't know, man.
But I just think that they are not going to be like Missoula is not going to put on the bulletin board. Top goal is the 1 seed, like that's or win 60 games. Right? It's going to be get through the regular season healthy. Just avoid any drama, anything like that. Nothing off the court. Get to the postseason, be the number 1 seed, which very well it should not require 60 games. I don't think we're going to have multiple 60-win teams in the East. I don't think that's going to be necessary. So could they win 60 and make me look dumb? Absolutely. With Porzingis, without Porzingis, I think they're capable of it in either case. But again, I just think that they have bigger things in mind than a certain number out of 82. They want to win 16 more in the postseason. So for that reason, I leaned under. And it might, 58, that's under. That's a hell of a regular season.
True. That's true.
They won 64 last year, which is absurd, and deserves all the accolades.
Why, like, are they really that much worse if the East got worse? Like, that's what makes me think over, just because they can win 59. Yeah. Like, I'm going to go over, but just because of the sheer sake of like respect for them and just the way they've handled themselves in the last 18 calendar months. And then to keep us moving on win totals really quick before I talk about Philly, what is Philly's at? And we could be thinking about Phillies.
Sixers are at 51.5.
Wow, that's high. Okay. Wow, all of these seem really high off the gate. Okay, so a couple things about Philly real quick. So the free agency gamble paid off. That has to be addressed out the gate. They gambled, and it paid off. Like, it has to be it can't be understated that the Clippers didn't pay Paul George the 4th year, and that was why he walked. It was that simple. You can't. It's this double-edged sort of, I want to reward the guy for getting the thing, but also not. Also, let's just explain the context of what it is, right? And so the tough part for me is like, okay, I'm really happy that they now have 3 pieces that they can mitigate risk with injury now. Like, that's the whole thing I've been preaching all offseason on pods, other people's pods, obviously not my own right now. But if somebody's out for a 22-game stretch, if somebody's out for 8 games, they have 2 guys now at least at any point. Obviously, there's chances that they're going to be injured in some way together. I get that. I'm not naive to that fact, but they can mitigate their risk. And their risk is, okay, regular season, I kind of think the opposite a little bit with them is like, I get where you're coming from, but I almost think the opposite. Where like I think they're just trying to gear themselves up for the playoffs, and they have a team built to win in the playoffs. My question, that'll kind of guide us through this thought here. I'm curious where you go with this. Is what is their closing five? Because it's a question I bring up all the time, but I have a legitimate concern that their closing five is like a team that can beat anybody in the East. And people are going to tell me, I'm like, okay, they're fully healthy. You're crazy. Maxey, George, and Embiid. Let's just obviously write those three in. But I have
Sure. Yeah.
questions outside. I think they have great pieces. I do, but I'm unsure of the way they match up against some other teams in the East that are, I think, just a little bit better in some of those spots, like a Cleveland or like a New York that we'll get to in a minute. Who would you have? I mean, I know I didn't prepare you for this, but who would you have there in that spot as the other two?
I think Martin has certainly showed, although not in Philadelphia, I think he showed an ability to be somebody you depend on. Obviously, you're not going to run anything through him unless they've been just crushed with injuries or been fouled out, something insane happening. He's the hot hand. He has one of his 30-point nights, whatever the case is. And then I just don't know. I mean, you've got, if they decide to use Kyle Lowry this year, do you dare try that? Reggie Jackson, Oubre's there still, I believe. I feel good about 4, and that 5th guy is going to be potentially a sticking point. Do you upset the apple cart within the locker room if you keep swapping guys in and out to try and figure out the 5th guy? If Martin doesn't show an ability to be alongside their big 3, don't have a ton of options outside of him. So
We both
it's
agree
going
it's
to be
Martin as the 4th, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's why you bring him in. Is they probably looked at the roster and was like, we need a guy who's been there, who's done it, who's proved it, and you hope it translates up the East Coast.
I went with Kelly Oubre as the 5th. I know none of this matters right now. I just
he'll get the first crack at it. I know that.
But do you really want him guarding Donovan Mitchell in a switch? Do you really want him guarding Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson? Like I'm not convinced that they're defensively strong enough on the wing where they're going to gear themselves up for the playoffs, and then I'm not convinced that they're good enough to win the playoff. Like I've made them as a pick, like even back to when Josh was my co-host, every single week, and we were like arguing back and forth, and he was always telling me I was saying about Philly, and I always said, look, this is the layout for it. It's these 3 pieces and and the supporting cast was better. I'm just not convinced the supporting cast is like I've had time to sit on it. Like when it all happened and shook out a few months ago, I many times I said like, okay, I think this is a really good Philly team. Sitting back now, people are going to argue Lowry there. Really? Like
that's tough.
To win an Eastern Conference semifinal series?
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
They 2 years too late for that.
Like, yeah, exactly. So my whole point is with them, they're talented enough, barring any injuries of more than 2 guys or more than 1 guy at a time, that they can be. I just kind of I put them as there's like a cap to their ceiling at 3. And so that was kind of
absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't hate that. I understand the argument for 2. I don't think there's actually much. I think marginally the same here 2 through 4. I think there's just a small gap. Remind me the win total, and I'll give you an answer, and then we'll go with my number 2, who you probably have at 3. So
it is 51.5. Obviously, I have them a 2 seed, so I'm going to need over that to accomplish that. So, but that's where
really,
it sits.
The way I'm trying to think about it, the way you put it, is there really a 7-game gap between Boston and Philly?
There may be, right? Between Boston and whoever's at 2.
This is so hard.
It was a lot bigger than 7 last year, too.
I would go with, because my problem is I have them at 3, and if I go under, that assuredly that solidifies that
the math starts to catch up to you. Yeah,
correct, and it gets real nasty because then it's like, okay, if Cleveland wins 49 games, I'm screwed. Because then it's like, okay, there's just I know they don't associate with each other. I know that's not how it works, but like all it takes is another team to be the other 50-win team. Like if we agree there's only 2 50-win teams, I think you alluded to that earlier. Or 60, I think is the number you threw out there, right? So I don't know. I'm going to go with over, but I feel terrible about it. And I wouldn't be putting my real money on it. This is just hypothetical. There's a few that I'm thinking hard about, but I went with over vaguely. I'm assuming you have New York at 3.
I do. Yeah, they're
Okay.
3.
I like the long pause
Even with
for
all the
emphasis.
chaos and the yeah, they want to be dramatic, so I got to be dramatic leading into this.
Did the cat trade affect anything? That's not my question for you, actually. I just genuinely was curious because, like, I wrote down
Not
verbatim. I was going to have them second before or after that trade. I just was.
right. No, I have not moved them since that. I mean, they just kind of. I mean, Randall obviously was a needed part of what they had going on, and you can't lean on Josh Hart hero ball for 2 series a year and expect to get any further than they did. I like the cat trade. I don't like it financially. No one in the league does, but you kind of just that's a tough pill to swallow. But you
Yeah.
do it because you want to win a championship, and as soon as you win a title, no one cares anymore. So that's obviously going to be their prerogative. But I think that I'm almost more concerned about them losing DiVincenzo than I was them losing Randall. Whatever command of that locker room Randall had left, I'm sure that Brunson will be happy to assume the rest of it. But and the things with Mitchell Robinson being out through, again, similar to Porzingis, probably the calendar year, I think really kicked into overdrive the perceived need from the Knicks to make a move and get a center that will be there, will be healthy. And he's an excellent shooter. He's no Dante DiVincenzo, but that's not a complete large or as large gap as far as loss of shooting goes. He's not going to shoot the same clip because there's not enough volume. But I thought it was a great trade for the Knicks. And even if you do overpay, you do it to just slightly crack that title window that much more slightly open. Obviously, the Bridges trade facilitated a lot of that, but this team is the definition of all in. And I think they have a title window, and like every title window or normal title windows, it's not very long. You get 2, 3, maybe 4 cracks at it if you're lucky enough. Contracts stay with the team that you want to. But yeah, I did have them 3. If the Bucks had a different coach, I may have them flip flopped. But no, I've got the almost complete Nova Knicks as the 3rd seed.
I'm just going to read their departures. Just going to go
There's
through them.
12. It's yeah.
So we have the same sheet. People probably assume that. It's daunting. It's daunting in a way that, okay, if you kind of go, okay, they lost a guy. The second guy on the list, I think alphabetically, is Charlie Brown. And so you're like, all right,
Younger legend. Yeah.
Right?
But yeah, it's
Peanuts legend too. So Bogdanovich, that was a good joke, I hope. Burks, Diakite, Keita Bates-Diop, Dante DiVincenzo, Isaiah Hartenstein, Daquan Jeffries, Shake Milton, Marcus Morris, Julius Randle, and Dwayne Washington. Look, it's a different team. It really is a structurally different team when you think about some of the guys that they lost and the addition of the Mitchell Robinson loss. Like that, they've obviously succeeded without him in big stretches in the last few years because they've had to, because he's been unreliable in that regard. I just think that highly of Bridges. I just really do. And then this was all like stuff I had prepped before Cat, and like the whole, shooting fall off from DiVincenzo. I'm going to be the last person that sits on here and defends Karl-Anthony Towns. I just am. Maybe me and like 4 others, right? There's not many defenders of him out there that I'm just not going to be one of them. And so the thought process for him is, I agree with you. It's big stability, because obviously Isaiah Hartenstein is not the reason you aren't making the finals now.
right.
Is he a reason he gets you there? Because we've seen in the last 3 years that role players and quality ones do that. Of course. Can Cat be a player that is the second best player on a championship team? I think that's what he's built for. I think the title, what he provides from a big shooting standpoint, like I know we joke all the time, like he says he's the best shooting big ever. You look at some of the numbers are going to tell you that. Like it's true. That also disrespects a lot of people. Like that disrespects a lot of people and what you think Kevin Durant is as well, right? Like he's not a typical big. I know we understand that, but at the end of the day, this team is just starting to gel. They're starting to have a nice bit of cohesion in the last few years. I'm just going to stick to the same questions I've had every year: are they going to be overworked? And then is Tibbs going to be able to outcoach somebody in the playoffs? And you look at what a bunch of potential matchups, and right now the answer is no. And so regular season wise, it's kind of the opposite of how you felt with Philly. Like I think it's completely opposite. I think this team is built. They're thinking They're thinking regular season. They're thinking let's be a really good team. Let's be this fun 55-win team that New York really wants and needs. My question is, once we get there, which is why I would justify New York 2 over Philly 3. Although I don't feel like I'm not like elated by it. I just think they're built to win, and just on paper and talent, they're the second best team in the East. What's their win total?
The Knicks are at 53.5 after a 50-win campaign last season.
Okay. What do you have? So high. God, they're all so high.
I went under just because I'm not totally convinced it's a perfect experiment from the start. I think they're going to need a good bit of this 82-game schedule to truly gel and figure it out. There's some moving pieces that entire NBA-size roster depart through, waiving guys, trading guys, etc. And Tibbs Cat wasn't the perfect marriage necessarily, so there's going to be hopefully not too much friction there, because I don't want something like that to take away from the true potential of this team. I think they're going to be a great team in the regular season. I just don't know if starting late October they hit the ground sprinting. They had that tear last year. We've seen them go on hot streaks. I just don't know if they don't struggle a bit early on. I haven't looked at their schedule. I don't know how front, back, middle loaded it is as far as quality of opponent.
I don't even really. I don't look at that until game.
There's
30.
so many games; it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot of teams they should. I just don't know if they'll have it initially. If they play a team, I don't know, call it top 6 in either league, that's you're beatable against those teams more than likely. Well, they might. I mean, again, it's New York. They drop a Tuesday night game to somebody that they shouldn't, or Vegas says they shouldn't. You're going to hear it on First Take for 4 hours. So it's that pressure cooker as well. Guys like a Towns who have not been in that environment ever. Maybe count College of Kentucky, but that's a whole different stratosphere. And you mentioned a team that New York needs. Just because they have a good team that they need doesn't mean they're going to treat it the best. We've seen that across their sports franchises. A lot of them, the fans tortured for a long while now across major sports. So I think that, that slight detriment to them as far as they'll have more pressure on them than any team in the league this year, I think, at least outside pressure. So I still think they're going to be the third best team in the East. I just don't know if they can quite get to 54 wins. And I'm hedging myself a little bit there because I think if you're sitting 3, you're probably at that win total. But I think that's going to be a very, very close one as far as getting to that 54th win.
I'm going to go over. I have him at 2. I'd be stupid not to. My question for the Knicks was, is Brunson capable of leading the Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals or Finals as a number 1 option? I think we both can agree that
the Eastern Conference Finals, absolutely. I mean, that's
winning a finals with him is a different question. It's just not. It's not one we have time to come back either, and it sucks. I should have led with it, but it's also like there's a lot that goes into it because we are making that answer an assumption on. We have no idea how this team's going to look with Cap.
Right. I think getting out of the East, sure, they can. Now, I'm not going to be at an 8 out of 10 like I was with Boston because they'll have to go through Boston. But
fair.
Getting to the
Eastern Conference Finals, to be there too. That was the biggest problem. People forget that like they weren't
last year.
Yeah, they were going to be killed in the finals or Eastern Conference Finals. They were.
It would have been the quickest 4 games in the history of the association. It would not have been. Yeah. No, I mean it's really tough. I think 2 through 4 is going to be separated by 5 games total in the East, in all honesty. So it's just a question of who can avoid those just 2-week lulls that, you don't worry about in December, but you get to the last week of the season, you're like, damn, we lost 3 games that week. Like, really, against those teams? So, I mean, I think it really will be that close. They could win the finals. I think if I was ranking East teams with their ability to get to the finals, I'd put the Knicks second. Even if, like we said, we've mentioned the turnover, there's a lot of it, but what you're bringing in is pretty good. As far as star power goes, they had the best offseason, if you're just looking at that. But I don't know about winning an NBA Finals. I think it'd be great for the sport, great for the city, state, etc. But I'm gonna have to have some of these questions answered before I get there. Eastern
Okay.
Conference Finals, absolutely, I could definitely see that. I'm sure they're right slotted in behind Boston as far as reaching that level of the postseason. Getting out of the East, if I could pick one team outside of Boston, it's probably them. Um, but can I imagine Tibbs suited up for an NBA Finals on the sideline? That gives me a little bit of pause too.
Yeah.
Not that he can, he just hasn't. I mean, it's things will have to go well with him and Cat, like I mentioned earlier. So I think that uh, potential. They have one of the higher ceilings in the league. I think it's just the floor could be so much lower than that ceiling. It could be a scary place to be.
Very narrowly at 4, I have Cleveland, as in very narrowly ahead of the team at 5. I have Cleveland.
Right.
I'm betting.
And
I'll just be short and sweet. I'm betting on the recent pedigree and playoff success that they've been here a couple times and they know what they're doing. I know new coach that kind of gives folks some pause.
mhm.
The thought process for me is Donovan Mitchell seems as bought in as any star in the NBA right now, and that might be one of the weirdest sentences I've ever uttered when it comes to this league because that's just not a normal place to be where you feel like he's a junior on like a mid-major college program that's like a perennial like it just reminds me of a guy that's just been around a program and been excited about it. And I mean, he acts like a Cleveland native. Like he's going to these playoff games, these Indian playoff games, and he's bought in and he's like responding to tweets in the offseason or early in the offseason when they got eliminated about like just his place and like, how happy he is. It's like, I'm just going to bet on them figuring out Mobley's offensive game has to eventually take a step. Why can't it be this year playing next to Allen? I know that they can obviously move Allen. There's plenty of teams that could probably use that kind of big. Obviously, the question still remains with Garland. Can they play together? Can they have playoff success together? And is it worth exploring other options? That was, again, segue to what I think is the case. But it's so tough. I think they're just too talented and too already playoff experienced as a young team that and 4 was just a comfortable place to put them hosting a playoff game.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I don't have them quite that high. I've got the Bucks at 4. Um,
Okay.
and this is the most coaching capped ceiling in the NBA. It's just he's already blowing leads to JJ Redick, so maybe he's in his head already. But I think that speaking of guys being bought in, Dame's going to have to be. The whole thing laughing off not training in the offseason, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. That's why you guys got bounced when you did. Because on paper, Dame, I know he's in an advanced stage of his career, and Giannis, who at one time and is still pretty close to the best player in the world, with a title to his name already, without Dame there. It's just hard for me to believe that tandem, if things go well, because they couldn't have gone much worse than last year. That's just how highly I hold both those players. But didn't lose a ton. Gary Trent Jr., maybe one of those fringe difference makers that could win you a playoff series or a playoff game that leads to winning a playoff series. But I think it's just weird to me to not have them hosting a playoff series, and that could very well prove not to be true. But I got through, Boston, New York, Philly, and I was like, all right, one more team to host at least the first round of playoffs in the East. And I started toying with a couple teams. I'm sure we'll have them here in some order, back to back to back. But I was just like, Giannis on the road in round 1. That to me just sounded alien, and I couldn't quite put pen to paper and make that a reality. So I slotted them in at 4, but it's going to get crowded and uncomfortable, I think, in this range of the East standings. So I could very easily miss this by 2 slots by a total of like 3 games.
Yeah, I'll be really short and sweet on Milwaukee. I have them at 6 because it sounds foreign. Like you said, it sounds crazy to think about. I just have too many questions outside of their top 2 guys. Like Middleton hasn't been consistently healthy in almost 3 years. Lopez is, he's closer to 50 than he is to 25. Like, at 50 closer to 20, you get my point. He's not getting any younger. They're going in this weird direction where they're drafting a bunch of young guys and they're just hoping one of them magically wakes up one day and is the 4th option. And that to me feels like hey, we're doing everything we can to think about Giannis in 4 years, but Giannis wants to win a championship now. He already did it once. He already won an MVP multiple times. He already won Defensive Player of the Year. He already won a Finals MVP. He's already done the things. He's already felt the high of the championship. And so like it being this thing he chases again, and you're telling me that this core is going to do it. Once you're in the playoffs with Lopez or with with Dame and Giannis, all bets are off. I'm totally in agreement there. The regular season's a long time, and these guys are probably going to play. Like most of them are probably going to be ineligible for awards. Like they just are. Like it's going to be the case. And at that point, I'm betting on the youth and the health of the two teams ahead of them. I have Cleveland 4, Indiana 5, and Milwaukee 6. And again, I know talent disparity wise at the top feels a little bit disrespectful. I just have so many question marks for them. Where do you have Cleveland? I know we jumped to Milwaukee for me at least, but
I've got them 5. So
okay, all right. So
not
that means you have Indiana 6.
I have Orlando 6.
Okay, this is going to get weird really fast. All right, so really quick, with Milwaukee, we'll hit these like win totals all together at the end, since we have a cluster of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a young guy? Because you clearly are betting on somebody or something taking a stride. I know I'm making you like scramble to pull the rosters up. It's more fun whenever I don't prepare people for stuff. The Jim Arrange podcast preview, the college basketball preview, I prepared. I gave those guys the first 16 questions. So that's still a great pod. It's just it was not as on the fly as I like to make it sometimes. Out of the young guys, is there somebody that makes this? Because you clearly are banking on somebody, or you just think that the older guys can be healthy. Like there's got to be one extreme or the other, I think. But
it was more of just bringing it back, a team largely composed this way, at least up top on the roster, that has won a title. And so many things change year to year in the league, and what it takes to get there and what you actually truly need to advance. As far as young guys circled, I think I'm hoping for a combined smaller step that elevates the team rather than one guy, because it's almost impossible. I mean, you're playing draft pick roulette at that point, trying to have a guy who you want on the floor to close a playoff game fresh out of the draft room. And that's,
I mean, even like an Andre Jackson who's been there a couple of years now. Like that's like, he won a championship at UConn.
Young
like that,
but not new. Yeah.
Right. Marjon Beauchamp, they clearly think is going to just eventually wake up one day and be a quality NBA player. I think he is. I just, to win a championship, to be a top 4 seed like you have them, like I just have question marks there. I just have question marks outside of the top 4. And like Portis might be Portis. Portis might be the guy, which is just an insane statement to say in October, even in August. Like it's an insane statement to think that he might be the guy. That's not the young guy I was looking for the answer for, but it's true. He could be the guy that, Lopez's absence and Middleton's absence. Maybe he's a really great third option and we just are all surprised. I don't know. I'm just, again, weird scenario there, but.
I mean, in a 7-game series, you have to be good for like 10 to 14 days. It's not like you have to be some world beater for a month. I mean, I saw it firsthand with those lovely Dallas Mavericks. It could be anybody, and it only takes an hour every couple of days for them to play well above what you could have ever perceived them to do, especially in that scenario. And you're looking at them upsetting somebody, getting to an Eastern Conference Finals. And even if it is Boston, it's still Giannis, and they're going to have some level of issues, even with a fully healthy roster, because Giannis is that good. I would take Boston in 5, but I mean, Giannis would cause problems like he has almost his entire career. So, it's going to be. I'm just hoping for the unknowns and the unexpected to go the way of Milwaukee this year, as opposed to last year where it largely did not. And, the Middleton disappearing acts are going to have to stop. I know health is something that, to a large extent, you can't control. But it's when it's this often, this many times, you start to wonder if there's some kind of, retooling process in what he's doing that needs to happen so he can be out there. Because if he's hurt for they could lose in the first round again. It's not out of the question. I think the East has caught up to them to that degree, even excluding Boston, which is, has caught up to everybody and then some. They cannot afford to have guys missing, because the depth outside of, what is Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, they're not going to save you in all likelihood out of more than one playoff game. So if
they're also not going to propel. To me, that was why I had Milwaukee where I did. They're not going to propel them to a top 4 seed. I just, there wasn't enough improvement where I was like, okay, barring a good bill of health, even with Dame, there was just enough question marks that I had pause. Okay, so where have we ended up? We've ended up with I have Cleveland 4, Indiana 5, Milwaukee 6. We've sort of hit Cleveland. I don't think you really gave a lot on Cleveland, did you? So
It wasn't all that much different from what you had. Roster largely the same. Mitchell seems to want to be there. He was a trade machine legend for a couple years. That might not have been truly his doing. The rumor mill in the NBA looks for a lot of things. Truth isn't always one of those things. So that may have been something he had or his agency had no part of, which is rare. But the Mobley thing, the offensive level up, step up, whatever you want to call it, it's more of an inevitable thing at this point than an expected thing because we've expected it for a couple of years now. Where he was drafted, you obviously expect him to play a significant role in what makes that team go. They've got other options. The synergy is going to have to improve a bit, I think, especially the coach to player relationship. You're starting over. Mitchell got the guy fired. So, I mean, it's that's always a tenuous thing, I think, when you have a younger team still. I know Mitchell's um, new guy to the NBA scene. He's been around for a while. And he's the best player on that team, I think. So, I mean, that's going to be important. Jared Allen, is he a Cav in February? Who knows? Do they get some sort of Godfather offer from a team they know on Biggs at the deadline that wants to, take that next step? If the Knicks just want every center in the league and they don't have Robinson yet, do they go and make some aggressive move there? I doubt it. But I'm not necessarily low on Cleveland. I just think they always seem to be just that close, but not quite there with whatever they're trying to accomplish. And it's at some point they'll break through. They're really fun to watch. The Avalanche stuff is great. They're great on League Pass. If they're down 10 in the third quarter, keep watching because a lot of times you will find that script flip pretty quick. Another team, almost mirror image roster, aside from draft additions, things like that. So the floor is high, but also the ceiling isn't crazy high just because of what we've seen so far with these players in this city and what they've been able to do. But that's a team I could see breaking out, getting to an Eastern Conference Finals mildly unexpectedly. And if you slot in as a 4 or 5 seed, that's not some otherworldly thing. But not quite. It really, for me, the Mendoza line was hosting a playoff series, and I was like, they always seem like they're right there, and they get in that mix the last 2 weeks of the season. They can't quite do it, and then the playoffs have not been overly kind to them. I know they beat a young Orlando team in 7, and after that, it was curtains. So, winning that second playoff series is going to be big for them, but I think regular season, they're going to be fine.
all right, let's hit Cleveland's win total and Milwaukee's win total and move on to, I guess, Indiana or Orlando, since I have them kind of flip-flop there with you. So Cleveland and Milwaukee's win total.
Cleveland is 48.5. Milwaukee is 50.5.
These are so bad. I hate all of this. All right, Cleveland is what now? Say it again. I was just
48.5.
And then Milwaukee?
50.5.
Easy under for Milwaukee for me. Cleveland is so hard. Cleveland's so hard. Because if I think they're a 4 seed, 48.5 is great. The 49 would be the bar. 47 and I'm going to go under because I think they win 47 games.
I went under for them too, just because I have 5, so I kind of that felt like I needed to have that hack.
Okay. Where do you have Indiana? Where you have Orlando 6, which is where they finished last year. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, and I think it's fair. But where do you have Indiana?
Indiana, I have them 7.
Okay, let's do Indiana first. Let's because I think my question sets this up perfectly. Because I have them at 5, right? Which I know 5-7 doesn't seem like a big difference, but that's play in, not play in. Yeah. It is. It's a huge difference, right? And so we almost should do these we almost should do these in tiers, like top 6, and then play in teams, and then just like who we talk about for the last 5 minutes of the pod. They've been up and coming for a couple of years. I have way more question marks with other teams. Like I think they're just a young team that overachieved, that's getting better and healthier. Right. They lost Mathurin for a lot of the year last year. I think this is the year, which is crazy, by the way. They're going from 6 to 5, but like even that feels like a jump to me in the way I have them laid out. I only have them behind Cleveland because of the playoff success in Mitchell. Like I just did like
Yeah.
Cleveland at least consistently being there and getting there. Obviously, the Indiana Pacers made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. That is a huge achievement, a huge step in their direction,
Right.
which feels like a cataclysmic drop from having them at 7. So my question would be, what holds this team back from being a top 3 seed? You can reword that question however you want because clearly neither
Sure.
of us have them there. I have them closer to that tier, and I wouldn't be shocked if they were. I wouldn't be shocked if they're better than Philly. I just wouldn't. I think
No.
you would. It sounds like from the gap a little bit, but again, 5 through 7 might be 4 games combined. So I would
Right.
love to know,
It's
like,
going to
just what
be.
holds them back is kind of the idea of the question.
I think when you overachieve to the extent they did, and we can go back and forth on did it affect the outcome of the series. Milwaukee and the Knicks were not Milwaukee and the Knicks when they faced up with these Pacers, and obviously you put who you have on the floor, you play it out. Who's supposed to win doesn't always win. Uh, I mean, that's just it happens with Philly every year. They lose somebody they shouldn't. But I think that I just question if they can get back to because where you've got them is more closer in line with where they ended up last year, which is Eastern Conference Finals, or being a strong candidate for that. And I just don't quite know if they can get back there. I think it's so hard once you overachieve to kind of hold that spot on the mountaintop, or at least that high up on the ascent, at least. Siakam back, that's massive. Nimhard was excellent for them in the playoffs, especially that Knicks series. Um, so that's a huge win. Mathurin, you mentioned, should be out there more. We hope. We love to see guys that talented on the floor. I mean, even guys like Obi Toppin, you don't necessarily scout a ton for, but they have one good game, a couple good weeks. Like, that's somebody you have to worry about when you get past game 82. But just regular season wise, I couldn't quite put a finger on it because I was looking and I'm going through it and I'm looking at it today, updating these win totals, and was like 7, like really, like a team that just was in the semifinals of the NBA last year, which
They're
granted
really deep, man. Like
few
they're
people
so
had them
deep.
there. So that was one I circled as far as like old takes exposed. Like,
Yeah.
if things play out like I think they're capable of doing, I'm not necessarily betting on it, but I mean, they could be a 4 seed, and I wouldn't be shell shocked if Milwaukee can't put it all together and keep the nucleus intact, and be as strong of a team as I think they maybe should be on paper through 82 games. And these other teams we keep mentioning, they're so tightly knit together in the standings. It happens every year in the East. I know we said 2 through 4 is a tight knit group potentially. It's really just a race for getting up in behind Boston and just seeing what you can make happen in the home playoff games. But this was the one I was most tempted to move today. In all honesty, was the Pacers, because I felt, am I that confident in Franz and Paolo making strides and elevating that team to? I mean, I think even 6 is a pretty big achievement for them, and they don't have, a guy like Siakam with all the experience in the world, things like that, title to his name, etc. So I was very strongly leaning towards flip flopping Orlando and Indiana, but I ended up sticking with my guns and just seeing how the year plays out.
I almost flipped Indiana and Cleveland 3 times today. Like it's crazy how like we're kind of in these 2 different tiers of like here's Indiana, here's Cleveland, and then like we're gonna talk about Orlando now. That was kind of my team where I was like, there has to be some regression, and I would bet on the team that's deeper. And I'm talking about Indiana in this case. If
Sure.
it was between Indiana and Orlando, I'm going to bet on the team that has the. It's so hard because it's like then you're arguing Tyrese Halliburton and Paolo Banchero. I get that. I'm going to bet on the guy that has. I'm going to bet on the team that has the best, arguably the best point guard in the Eastern Conference, true point guard. Obviously, that excludes somebody like Brunson, who's at this point is just a ridiculous scorer. But I really, really like Halliburton. I think he's really a good player. I think the way they've elevated themselves, I almost felt the opposite, where like that appearance gives them an immense amount of confidence. And if we're just talking top 5 seed, they don't have to make it back there for it to feel like a failure. They just have to be
Right.
better than 6. And I just thought 5 was a fair jump, I guess, if that even makes any sense.
Hmm.
I feel really good. Like I feel really good about Orlando, but really quick on Orlando, right? They finished 5th last year, which is a like You're talking about overachieving. Like
That was yes.
I'm thinking 8 or 9. Even Magic fans, 8 or 9, happy, good. They have to continue to grow offensively. There were some stretches in the final 5 minutes of the last 40 games of the season. Their offense was so good for so long, and then they just forgot how to close games consistently. It got to a point where it was nauseating. Okay, I want to watch this team in the final few minutes. Here we go. And is Wagner going to step up, or is Paolo going to get an ISO? And then they just couldn't win those games down the stretch, and yet they still finished fifth. It's an insane statement to even think about. I think not having a true point guard is a big, big question mark. They didn't re-sign Fultz, so they clearly think someone like Anthony Black or Suggs is going to do it, or they clearly think someone's going to step up. And I just wholeheartedly disagree. And so my question for them was, and maybe it's the opposite in this case for you because of where you have them, is what is the biggest concern for why this team might not replicate their success? And for me, it was the point guard position.
Well, it's that, and by virtue of that, the offense. Again, the defense was great last year. If Jonathan Isaac is healthy for a full season,
fourth best scoring defense. I want to add that fourth best scoring defense.
That's how they landed at the 5 seed. Because to your point, in crunch time, they were probably the 30th offense in the league for a large part of the late part of the season, and that's what doomed them in that series against Cleveland, which you could argue they were not expected to win. But you force a game 7, anything can happen. You hate to have a season end with a game in the 80s or whatever it was, but. I'm hoping the defense can, again, not bail them out because it wasn't enough. Once teams kind of got them figured out, you hit 90, you're probably going to beat them. And it's more just a blind belief in the guard situation fixing itself in a sense. If they're moving off from faults, like you mentioned, there's some internal belief in someone. They're not going to come out and say it that, okay, this is our point guard. He's going to be the reason we get to round 2 this year. But I'm hoping to bank on the young talent. It's kind of like what you tried to set me up with Milwaukee. I think there's guys that are hopefully going to take that step and the added responsibility. And by the time they get to the end of the regular season, they're comfortable enough to facilitate an offense that can make some noise instead of wilt late. Because that is what's going to decide a lot of things for them. It's going to be the last half of the fourth quarter on the road, back-to-back. 3 games, 4 nights, whatever the case may be. Those games matter. Everybody plays them. And a large part of your regular season success is hinged on, can you win the games you're not supposed to? If you're up 3 with 4 minutes left on the road somewhere you shouldn't be up, are you going to win that game? Because you're going to have 10, 12 games like that with a team this good defensively where you haven't been offensively necessarily great that night, but the defense has been there. It's been excellent. You have a chance to win. Somebody's got to take the ball and score at some level. So that's going to be really what decides if they're even clear from the play-in, honestly. Because if the offense is leveled off like last year and the defense sags just a little bit, they're going to be in the play-in. I just think these teams are that closely knit down here. And they could slide to a 7 or maybe even an 8. I don't know about 8, but certainly 7 to where you're having to play for your playoff life.
I think KCP is an incredible player because he can be both. He can continue to bolster their defense. He's sure as heck not going to play point guard. No. And then, at least he's an offensive threat from behind the line. That's somebody you can be happy about.
You're sending somebody out there. Yeah.
I know that they again, we've kind of almost brushed past some of the draft part of all this where I know it's you're going to have rookies that come in and do really well. And obviously this draft was, was somewhat forgettable in a sense. They drafted Tristan da Silva, right? And I think is an incredible player. Again, not a point guard, not a guy that they're going to try to play early, not a guy that I think is going to be, I think he'll spend a lot of time in the G League. But my whole problem with them, even with you mentioned the offense earlier, they're 24th in scoring last year. And it's not like they even had okay, well, maybe they were just a team that was playing, wasn't playing within themselves and they were playing too fast. It was the opposite. Sometimes I look at pace as kind of okay, if your offense especially in the game, you're never going to be teams slow down the end of the game. That's just is what it is. To set themselves up there, they were 25th in pace. They weren't playing to a point where they are playing like a young team that can get out and run and make baskets in transition. That would really help their offense. The problem is it doesn't help the final 5 minutes. It just doesn't. And so I just have too many question marks there. At the 54-minute mark, let's roll through the rest of the play-in games, and then we'll kind of just storyline it out from 11 through 15 because the East sucks.
It gets bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just bad. So
it gets
really
bad.
quick, win total on Indiana and Orlando.
Indiana is 47.5, as is Orlando.
Over for Indiana, very slightly under for Orlando because I still think they won 45, 46 games. They won 47 last year, to be clear. And if I think they regress, it's an easy under to answer my own thought. So.
Sure. Yeah. No, I have over for both. I think they could be at 49 and 48. So those both get there. But it's maddening looking at some of these win totals, and they're just so tightly packed in together, and with one seed separated by a game, or in some cases 0 games. Like we saw with Orlando and Indiana last year, both at 47. So it gets real tough to start doing the math. But I'm hoping for 2 slight overs there.
I have a corpse of Miami at 8. I have Atlanta at 9. I have Charlotte 10. We probably have the same 3.
Yeah, I put Spo Magic for Miami. That's it, because that's the only thing that's going to keep them in the top 8. But it's more of a lack of belief in the teams behind them. I've got Toronto 9. It's more of just
Toronto doesn't want to be 9.
I want them to be good so bad. They have so many guys they paid, frankly, too much money.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
But I think that just combined potential is really exciting, and I'd rather be wrong being overconfident and look back and be like, man, why didn't I bump them up just a little bit? So I don't expect to, make a fortune off of this take, but I think that Toronto's got a large amount of what if, and I'm banking on a more favorable outcome. Although in the NBA, when you have more questions than answers, it typically does not play out well, especially over a larger sample size of 82 games. So that was more of a why not kind of deal. Because as you mentioned, we're going to get through the bottom half of the East in about 5 minutes. So
I couldn't figure out who took a leap to raise the Heat ceiling. I just couldn't. I think they're almost in this weird point where they're veteran enough, or almost too much, I guess, if you consider Rozier right now as a veteran, 30, plus now. But they're almost it feels so disrespectful every year to put them where we put them, and yet they continuously land there, and then they get to the playoffs, and literally all bets are off.
They want to beat 8 seed. That's all I want in life.
Bam
the 8 seed
and Butler,
go beat Boston. Yeah,
it might be the most disrespected top 2 in the East every year, and it's just one of those things. I'm going to look back on this in history and go, I don't know if I felt bad about it, because you think about 2020 and the Lakers finals. I mean, I think if that game's played in 2 different places or whatever, I think if that game's not played in the bubble, I mean, yeah, their home crowd is good from quarter 3 on, but I don't know if they win a game if that wasn't in the bubble. I just don't. Looking back on that team, I know that has nothing to do with this year, but it's just the way that the team is constructed. It's the exact same, and so they're starting to figure out. Okay, we have to think forward a little bit, and so guys like Jaime Jaquez, they continue to take these guys that are just going to overachieve, and it makes me mad every time because I just don't believe in every single one of them. And then here we are. I wrote the same thing. If Eric Spoelstra is the head coach, this is a team will find a way to make the playoffs.
Will. I can't. Yeah. If nothing else, bank on that. He's not going to get injured. So I think, the Spoelstra coach team, the floor is 8 now, and they put this team in the West. They're not 8th, but they have the luxury of being over in the East. So I think 8 just felt appropriate for what we have though.
I'm going to choose to leave Toronto alone. I have Atlanta 9 and Charlotte 10. You went with Toronto 9 and Atlanta 10. Did I hear that right?
Yes, I did.
So you probably don't have Charlotte that far away, so I'll hold on Charlotte.
Yeah.
I think the Hawks are going to be better than people think. I'm not the first person to say that. There's been plenty of people who have said that in the last few months. I think Murray is addition by subtraction. It's a lazy take. But again, same argument about Cat. We've done pods for 2 years. You know where I'm going. I am the last person on planet Earth that's going to defend Trae Young. That is the one there. You know this. This is the one person that knows how to dribble a basketball that I will not defend. no pun intended. Them being heliocentric with him, I think is the best thing they can do at this point. If we've already seen now for many years, if he doesn't have the ball, they're not good. It's that simple. With Murray
Right.
there stealing touches, I just, even though I hate it and I think it's stupid, and he can't defend, he's the statistical worst defender in the NBA. Year in and year out. I think they're going to be better. I think enough guys around them. I know Bay is a big loss, but
Yeah.
like Daniels might be the pickup of the offseason. He just might. Dyson Daniels is a great change of pace defensive guard. He will help. Obviously, you can't play them together very often, but I think they'll find a way. But he's an incredible defender. He's a defensive guard. I think he's figuring things out as an offensive player. And I think those two together are really fun. Obviously, again, all the draft stuff, we just don't really talk about the draft in these previews because it's just very few times where like maybe in the West, you'll hear us talk about it a few times. At least I will have a few points with the West that I think matter with the draft. But Reese Shea, he just has to be a good catch and shoot guy and continue to learn how to be an offensive player. And I think as he continues to develop, I don't think it hurts their cause. I mean, they just have to be healthy. And if they're healthy, they're going to be a competitive team. They're always in this nine seed spot. So why can't going back to what's worked? Like it might be the number one team in NBA history to ride the coattails of one single playoff series, which is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean they've been playing frequent flyers ever since.
Every other year, but that one.
Right. Oh, it's without fail they're in that 4 seed section largely on the tail end bits. I mean, I had to put them 10 because I had to have them in. I just
that's why
Trae Young.
Yeah,
Trae Young is abhorrent defensively. But that being said, if they gravitate back towards having the ball in his hands, you mentioned Bay is a subtraction, but a Jalen Johnson step could maybe make up for a good bit of that if things play out the way they expect.
Think it's coming. I certainly don't know.
There's almost too much on that. I worry when we place expectations on guys to make
Correct.
leaps in spots that would be a very fortuitous thing for Atlanta. And Reza Shea, be out there, be healthy, get reps in, get used to it. Just be somehow a net positive, which I don't think will be difficult for him to do. They've got Capella Okongwu down low. We'll see. Larry Nance, I don't think he's going to be some sleeper, close the game kind of guy for them. But you need 2 or 3 bench players you can trust in the NBA to be any form of playoff or play-in team. So, we'll see. Dyson Daniels I like. We'll see what a change of scenery does for him. They're going to need the defensive prowess, like you mentioned, for sure. And he won't be able to directly offset it with Trae because they're very unlikely to share the court very much. But, I had him 10 because I had to have – I mean, Trae Young, can he be the best player on a title team? Probably not. But for him to not be in the postseason, to me, felt like too much disrespect. So put him 10, last team in. That's fine. Like we've said, they've been in the play-in every year since they beat Philly. So the 10 just kind of felt right. 8 and 10, if I get those exactly right, I'm not surprised at all with Miami and Atlanta.
Okay, so the only difference really is you probably had Charlotte 11 or 12.
11, yes.
All right, so then let's just hit the final 5 and get out of here. So, because we have a whole nother West to do. So, a couple things. I put Charlotte in at 10 because I get the point about Toronto. My question for Toronto was, do those contracts of Barnes and quickly give you pause that they're truly rebuilding? And you clearly think that there's some bit of upside there, and that doesn't even include Barrett. I made it very known.
Sure.
I love RJ Barrett. I think he's a great player, and I think he's going to overachieve again this year. So the question mark is that top 3 enough? And you're probably right. I have them at 13. Wow. They very openly don't want to win, though. So that has to mean something.
Yeah.
I don't know. They just don't want to win. But then again, they're going to overachieve, and I'm going to be really mad when they're the 8 seed. And it is what it is.
If you throw enough young guys out there, they're just going to tune the coach out who's telling them to break the next 5 shots so they can get out of there with a loss. I don't know. I mean, we see this with the Jazz every year. They play an excellent first half, and then they have a big powwow at the break, and then they come out and lose, 15 of 17. And all of a sudden, you're looking at ping pong balls and not playing spots. But if there was a mirror image of that in the East, probably Toronto as far as get through, and it's not a clean break in the middle of the season, but get through the first half of the season, get to the All-Star break, and then kind of see what you have. Are they going to be a top 4 seed? Absolutely not. There's no chance. All these guys could take leaps. They just don't have it. Especially if organizationally, that is the last thing they want them to do. So
Correct. They'll find a way to
doesn't
suck February on. That was the best
right.
thing.
You just hope it doesn't stunt the development for what the 3 to 5 year plan is, which is largely these guys being here, playing well, and Toronto's back in the finals and winning titles. But yeah, organizationally, that's my biggest thing with this team is I trust the team more than the guys in charge of it, because to your point, they don't have a true direction, and what you could probably guess is not the direction you want of a team you slot even into the play-in in a softer, lower to tail end of the Eastern Conference, because as we've seen in the East, if you want to be bad, it's very achievable. And yes, it's painfully obvious, and the league has tried to curtail that, but you're not going to stop them completely. So I'm banking on some sort of mutiny from the players. They're like, no, we're not going to turn this tie game with 2 minutes left into a 7-point loss. We're going to go win. And if they do that just enough, they can climb the ranks of that bottom half of the East pretty quick. So that was my logic for number 9.
All right, so that solidifies the top 10. I have Charlotte. Again, they're one of my favorite young teams. I think their success obviously hinges on LaMelo's health. It just continues to do that.
Oh, of course.
And
yeah.
They've got to start really thinking about franchise cornerstone pieces moving forward, and LaMelo and Miller. Not that both can't coexist at this point, but sometimes capitalizing on value isn't always the worst thing. And I'm not hinting at a Charlotte Hornets trade. I'm not. That's not what I'm doing. But they've got, this is a new ownership. This is a new GM reign. And if all of that has told you anything in the past, just expect the unexpected. I have mid 10 because I think they're too talented. I just do. I get what you're saying about the top 3 of Toronto, and I just believe in Charles Lee too. I mean, that guy, I've run through a wall for him. If I'm a Hornets fan right now, that's the guy you want. I mean, he is incredible. I know it's like 4 social media videos in 4 months. Like, I get that, but like he's a proven winner everywhere he's been. Milwaukee, Boston, and even as a couple of assistants. I think he was an assistant in the G League before that. And so I just believe in them too much. I believe in, sometimes we always make the lazy addition by subtraction. When you subtract Michael Jordan as an owner and you insert new ownership in GM reign, it can't be worse. It sure as heck can't. I don't know. There's enough going right for them that I'm eventually going to be right, that they're going to be better. I've said that for years, and I've just been wrong, and I've been burnt, and I've been annoyed. And so, just for Josh's own mental well-being, I think they're going to be really good as a young team. I think they're going to kind of elevate themselves towards the end of the year, because they have no reason to suck, i.e. Toronto, like they do. And so, I don't know. Let's hit the win totals really fast of the teams that we just mentioned, and then we'll just rattle the last 3 or 4. So I think we didn't do Miami, Atlanta, Charlotte, and Toronto.
All right, so Miami is at 44.5. I went under. I
hate this so much. I don't even want to do it for the West. It's gonna be so dumb. Okay, I'll go under because they went 43. How about that?
Yeah, I'm in that same ballpark. Atlanta 35.5.
Over. What?
Yeah, I did too. 36.
If they're under, like, things went catastrophically bad. That's right. Yeah. 35 is, you said 35.
Trae Young's a Laker if that 35.5 coming off a 36 win season. So that could be the same team. I think.
Oh God, that's crazy. Okay. Anyway, yeah, over happily. Yeah.
Yeah. Toronto.
I'm writing that down to bet that when we're done. Actually, let me do that. Sure. That's insane. Go ahead.
Toronto 29.5. Obviously, I'm going to go over, and I assume you're going to have under, just based on where we have them slotted.
What's crazy is 29 is really low, though. It's so like they win 30 games. They can win 30 games.
30
Like, they
and
just can't.
52,
They can win
which is
30
horrible.
games. So stupid. I hate these so much. Oh God. I don't
30 is
know,
probably
man.
like the 10 seed in the East. I mean, it's
dang, man, that's so hard. So what did they win last year? I know that's irrelevant to this point, but I just genuinely
25. I got it. They're 25 win team last year.
I think they can win 4 more games. I'm gonna go under because I just have
5
to.
wins better to go over. I'm gonna go over because at this point I'm pod committed.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, I cannot believe I forgot they went that low last year. Yeah. I see what Vegas is doing, and that's really nasty work. But
you're gonna love Charlotte.
On Canadians. Yeah.
Charlotte last year tried their best and won 21 games. I'm gonna have you guess what you think their win total is this year.
It's 31. It's probably something stupid like that.
It's 30 and a half. You were exactly right. And I can't do it. I can't do it. The most viral LaMelo Ball highlight last year was him on a go-kart on his damn apartment roof. So I can't do it. They're just
oh man, it makes me rethink
Trey Mann
everything.
as the point guard, maybe, but I don't know. And he may be the point guard for 2 months when LaMelo's ankle explodes.
He really might.
But, I can't do it. I went under.
30 is so dumb. I hate this example.
They're not going to be 10 wins better. I don't care how removed Michael Jordan is.
Yeah, but I have them as I think they are.
I mean, you have to.
I have to take over because
I just.
Oh God. Okay, I'm gonna go over. And I think the bar for 10 might. I'm rethinking everything. This is so dumb. Because all of the bottom teams that we're not even gonna really talk about. Like, I feel so bad, but like,
these get bleached really quickly.
They just might be better. Like, they just might be better than people think. But when you throw out the fact they won 21 games last year. I think they're talented, though. That's the issue. I think they're so talented, and it's the same. I've been thinking Detroit's going to finally figure it out for a while every year, and I'm just annoyed. And so, like, think about, like, my question for Detroit was, how long is too long for drafting young guys over and over again with seemingly no plan? At least Charlotte has a direction. I'm going to go over. I know I just long-winded. I'm going to go over, and I'm just going to stick to it because I hate every team below them. And that includes Toronto, which is really sad. But
yeah.
So. All right. So we've hit did we hit Toronto?
Yes.
All right. So let's do who do we have left? We have Detroit. I have Detroit 11. Let's do this. I have Detroit 11, Chicago 12. I have Toronto 13, Washington 14, Brooklyn 15, and Cam Thomas is going to average 30 points a game.
And no one's going to know. Yeah.
Not a person in Brooklyn will know that happened.
No. I had Charlotte 11, Detroit 12, Chicago 13, Washington 14.
We're in lockstep.
15.
Yeah. This okay. Yeah.
Brooklyn's win total. You want to throw a guess out for that? Because it is frightening.
16.
18 and a half.
Which I'm going to slot them in 16. So let's go with under. Let's just hit it while we're here. Under. Yeah, I know it's not in order, but who cares?
I went under, and I'm scared to see how they get under because it's going to be just awful.
It's bad. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
When Cam Johnson's your second best player, you have issues.
What's so funny to me, and this is so like dumb. I'm just going to say it came to my mind. Their arena is one of the. You're talking about like Cavs, a really fun league pass team because it's just exciting in there, and you can kind of tell like okay, atmosphere. Like that's probably a top 5 atmosphere in the NBA when they're winning. The Nets stadium, it looks like a funeral home with no people in there, obviously. But then it's also so dark. It's like they have curtains up in the 100s, and I'm like, okay, this is. I might not watch a league. I might not watch a single game. I really might. I
watch the ones they play on the road.
I feel horrible even admitting this. Like I just do. I might not watch a game. I really might. Anyway, Detroit. Let's do them in order. Detroit.
I mean, at some point,
that's what my question was.
This Sam Hinkie draft run has got. Yeah, you give him more than every other player. That's not. You can't be a serious organization and operate in that way. So I mean, Tobias back. That's cool. Veteran leadership. they can't have too much leadership because they've been adrift for way too long. And they have, I mean, Jaden Ivey might see the court this year. That's a plus. He's
Right.
been good the whole time, but he might play this year. Jalen Duren is an animal in the paint. They got Isaiah Stewart, who will fight until there's blood pouring from his face, so that helps. Just they have too many top like 6 draft picks to be this bad, and eventually someone's going to figure it out. I don't hate the addition of Paul Reed, who in spot starts in Philadelphia was great. I mean, it's just that's how in the weeds you have to get. I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. is there. That's fine. At least he's not in Dallas because I hate him for that. But I mean, it's the bottom of the East is just scary. But
It came
I
down
don't
to bigger
think
staff for me. It just did. It came down to bigger
I mean,
staff.
the fact that they could find someone to employ to do that job, hats off to whoever.
The fact that it was a coach that got the Cavs to the playoffs multiple years too, like
right.
I don't know,
And
he's been incredible wherever he's been. Like he just
butted heads with Donovan Mitchell and got sent packing, which is a whole different issue. But no, I thought they were very, very fortunate to have that essentially fall in their laps. So yeah.
So their win total for me.
It is 25.5. That would necessitate them being 12 games better than last year.
Oh my God. Okay.
So almost doubling because they were, I mean, they won 14 games last year. It took them 6 weeks to win one time.
We've kind of hedged. We don't have time for this, but there's a way to hedge to. There's a way to hedge. There's a way to hedge their over and still be okay. So
yeah,
we sound like insane asylum patients by saying like we think they could go over because 11 in the East
doesn't take much.
But like is 11th in the East really 24 wins? That seems really low.
I mean, it's.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it seems really low. Like it seems. I know that would be like. What did I mention? I said it last year. I think I said it to you like during the regular season. I said if they
won 50 games the last 3 years. 4 years.
I know it. I said if they double their win total, it would be one of the biggest turnarounds in NBA history.
Yeah, and they're essentially being tasked with that to hit this win total.
Then I have to go over, and I feel bad about 11 now. I think 11's wrong then.
I'm like, going
what am I more confident in?
11, so daunting.
11 or the under? Like what am I more confident in? I think they have to be the 11 seed because all the teams below them suck that much. I'm going to go under. I'm going to go under, and I think it's a dumb bet. But don't listen to this. Not gambling advice. All right, and as disrespectful as it might be to these 3 franchises, I don't feel bad about Chicago, but because I really do like what Washington's doing. I'm like excited about the direction.
Too early.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's hit Chicago. I have Chicago 12, Washington 14, Brooklyn 15. We established that earlier, where we have everything else very similar. So let's do the win totals for these 3 and get out of
here. Chicago is 27.5.
Under. Comfortably.
Yeah, they are. They are in like if there was a find God tier of this, they're right there. Because you can be bad, but you can't be bad paying somebody like they pay Zach LaVine to not play basketball. I will watch them on League Pass to watch Lonzo Ball return to the court, and then I will cease to watch them for the next 5 months.
Yeah, I'm glad that he actually might be returning. The other thing too is like my question for them. I'll just throw it out there since we at least are going to talk about him for a second. Is can Zach LaVine find a home? I don't mean a home in Chicago. I mean a home elsewhere. Chicago. I mean, they're driving him to the next city. They're not even driving to the airport. I mean, it's like the old joke. But
as a Lakers fan, how scared are you that home is the Lakers? That they can't get Trae Young.
I think they understand how depreciated of an asset it would be. It would literally be for a future like second. Like I think at this point it would be for that low of a value. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if it was a guy that was the 8th guy for a second round pick. I really wouldn't. Like I just wouldn't be upset about that.
I don't know how anybody's cap sheet survives that.
That's the problem. Yeah,
it is so bad.
If it's just face value for face value and contracts are irrelevant, like I wouldn't be mad.
Sure, no, absolutely,
100%.
He'd have a home already, but that is just awful.
That's a good point. I guess that's what we get for talking about Zach LaVine at the 118 mark. So
yeah, but no,
so comfortably under for both of us.
Yeah.
Washington, what do you have? Or what is the win total?
It is 20.5.
This one's hard. Well, I don't know. Is it?
I went under because I think they're in a competition with Brooklyn, not Boston. So they're going to be keeping pace frantically, I think, as you know. And if they deal Kyle Kuzma, forget it. So I didn't put, admittedly, a ton of thought into this, but it's an under for me because if you're in the bottom of the East, you are terrible record wise. So
The issue for me, I don't even think this is worth an argument of our time. But Detroit won 12 games last year, and that was borderline historically bad. And so I know the line's 20, but do we really think that they're 8 games away from historically bad? I'm not sure that they're that bad. And so
yeah,
I would say under, but that still puts me comfortably at 18 to 20.
sure,
So
yeah.
I'll go under, barely. Now, Brooklyn,
Oh yes,
I think you already said what this was, didn't you?
18.5, which is very close to historically bad. And I have them under because
Yeah, what's the case? Like, is there even a case?
blind belief in pride. That's it. I don't know what else you. I mean,
They won 32 games last year, but they absolutely shelled house. I mean, they did.
right, but all the catalysts behind that are, same city, not, you know, no longer present. Like Claxton's back, that's great. Cam Johnson's there, sure. Cam Thomas, uh, like you said, will average 42 points a game. No one's going to care. It's just
Lonnie Walker
yeah,
averaged 9.7 points per game last year in 58 games played, and now he literally couldn't get a contract except for with Boston for an Exhibit 10.
right. Which is
This is bad. It's really bad.
yeah, no, it's.
I'm going to go under. I'm not going to think hard about it. So
I'm going under. I know they flattened the lottery odds, and I'm glad they did it, but they're in a race to
relegation.
Total. If the win total starts with a 2, they might fire somebody for that reason. Be like, damn it, we told you, 19 wins, that's it, and So it's so shameless in how these teams go about this. No matter what Silver or anybody else in charge of this does, you just okay, 4 teams even odds. All right, we're gonna make real sure we're one of those 4 teams, and I dare you to try and stop us. And I think the Pistons may eventually think, we keep finishing second to last, and we keep picking 6th. So what if we just start trying to win? But I think for Brooklyn, it is a submarine, not a rocket ship this year, because they are going very deep down towards the bottom of the history books, let alone the frightening tail end of the Eastern Conference. So it's just, they're going to be abysmal. And even if they're not instructed on a given night to be terrible, I think if, as we see some bigger fish in the pond kind of bite off pieces of role players, et cetera, guys for playoff runs coming off the bench, it could get historic down the stretch. They're 15th, and if you're 15th out of 15, we're not going to have much. It's just will we see history if they win like 7 games? But it's going to come down to how much pride and just will Cam Thomas refuse orders to lose 15 games a month. I don't know, but it's dire to say the least in Brooklyn right now.
Yep. Hour and 23 minutes. The Eastern Conference, the final 23 minutes are going to be quite the fun listen, I'm sure, for just some of these fan bases. And I just severely apologize ahead of time, but they know where things are headed. And so if you're listening to these first, awesome. I can only imagine. We don't know, as we're talking about this right now, we don't know how long the West is going to take. So we're going to jump right over there to that. If you see the same close, don't think twice about it. It happened the same night. It is what it is. It happened 2 years in a row. But without further ado, it's a lot of fun. You'll see us again very shortly here. Again, whether you're listening to this first or second, doesn't matter. You'll be seeing Grayson and myself throughout the rest of the regular season as well. We'll be hitting some kind of award predictions at the bare minimum, of course, but we'll be watching a bunch of NBA games. Again, one of the only people that I know that actually watches regular season NBA and actually kind of cares. And so I say kind of like it actually cares about it and actually wants to just enjoy a Tuesday night that has no football. Like it's just a nice. There's people that just admittedly object it. And it's kind of annoying when I would rather watch basketball than not watch basketball. Now, when college basketball starts in the Big 12 and the ACC and the SEC all play on a Tuesday night, yeah, I'm gonna miss a Wizards Celtics game. I just am. Like, I'm just gonna watch Kansas and I don't know, North Carolina Central or wherever. Anyway, the point is the East is going to be really bad at the bottom, and that was why we ended up trying to cut this down to the last few minutes. So, without further ado, this has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. We'll see you when the regular season gets going.